Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with veteran jazz pianist Andrew Burashko of the Canadian group Art of Time Ensemble. He opened up with me about the band, their history, COVID, and the 2021 CD Ain't Got Long, featuring vocalists Madeleine Peyroux, Gregory Hoskins, Joni Mitchell, and Sarah Slean, as they cover songs from the likes of Radiohead, Joni Mitchell, Paul Simon, Robert Johnson, the Gershwins, Irving Berlin, and so many others. It's a great story. Enjoy.
Hey, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
So, I guess I want to start off here with this super group. We've gone through one hell of a ride this last year, and I know that musicians have missed the live stage, and there's been so many self-reflective elements that have gone into this. This must have been kind of a sojourn or an oasis to be around like-minded musicians to make something of this caliber.
Well, actually, we recorded this album before COVID hit. It was recorded in May of 2019, and I think we finished mixing and mastering by October of 2019. So, let's see, that would have been 5 months before COVID hit, And then once it hit, I thought we would wait until things resumed, until we could start touring again before releasing the album. And then finally I just said that, the hell with it. I wanted it to see the light of day, and who knows when this will end. I don't know what it's like down in the States, but things are just getting worse in Canada. So I have no sense of when this thing will end, So unfortunately, we didn't have that oasis during the last year.
Yeah, that's too bad. And everywhere around the world is in a different place. And I know that we've been kind of extolling the virtues of the fact that 100 million adults have been vaccinated. My 16-year-old son got his first shot yesterday. And
wow.
I got my shot about a month ago. I got the Johnson & Johnson one shot. So, lots of those things are happening. There's shows that are kind of starting up around here. I mean, they're all socially distanced. Everything's getting better. But, yeah, everything fluctuates around the globe.
Yep, it's different. Yeah, my daughter's in Europe, and they're going through another wave.
That's wild. Well, I guess talk to me a little bit about this album, and there's covers from wonderful musicians, from Radiohead to Joni Mitchell, Paul Simon. It's all over the place. Talk to me a little bit about how you all picked these songs and kind of orchestrated such heavy songs to cover.
I don't know how much you know about us, but I myself am a classical musician. I grew up listening to pop music and jazz, and Canada's not, in the end, it's not that big a country. The music community, even though it's substantial, we all know each other more or less. And so I started Art of Time to create shows that erased those categories or genres, right? To just put on great music, right? And when we started experimenting with pop music, which is essentially what you're hearing on this album, the idea right from the start, and we're talking the first pop project was in 2007, and it actually featured Sarah Slean, who sings on this album. They were called songbooks, these projects. So I would invite a pop singer and ask them to choose 12 covers that they've always wanted to do. And then I would delegate them to a slew of arrangers with completely disparate sensibilities. Some people from the world of jazz, some from the world of pop and classical. I always wanted the programs to be as eclectic as possible. And the idea of letting them choose the songs was because, when they're stepping into this situation, it's way outside their comfort zone, In their context, all the arrangements are created around them. Whereas here they have to step into, even though we never mess with the melody or the form, it's still disorienting for a pop musician to, it's a challenge. So, so we did one with Sarah, we've done about 10 of them over the years. And my favorite arrangements were always Jonathan's, kind of the closest to my own sensibility and my own heart. And I've been wanting to make an album of his arrangements. I mean, this is not even half of what he's created for us over the years. Yeah, I've been wanting to make this album a really long time. So we've also done portrait concerts of Lou Reed and Steve Earle, Leonard Cohen. So some of the songs on this album were chosen by the singers. Some were chosen by me. So the Lou Reed, the Steve Earle, and the Joni Mitchell were chosen by me. And the rest were chosen by the singers for those particular projects. I hope all of that made sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I keep thinking about the fact that we're dealing with jazz. You come from a classical world. You're covering pop music. How do those three brains, those id, ego, superego, come together for you as a creator?
Well, I mean, through Jonathan. Jonathan is one of the best jazz pianists I've ever heard. He came up in the pop music world. He was, when he was young, he worked with Bruce Cockburn. He played in his band. He produced a bunch of his albums. And he's also a really serious lover and student of 20th century classical music. So that's how it comes together. You know, basically, if there are any rules that I've followed, the other thing is always to find that line between remaining authentic to the spirit of the original and stretching the boundaries. So it's always been either a jazz singer or a pop singer. And the rhythm section of the ensemble has always been jazz or pop. And the classical musicians fill out the rest of the palette of sounds.
So clearly the interplay with this group is strong, and it's just, it sounds wonderful. Tell me how this works, how you all have come together to create such a voice based on your backgrounds and who you are. And you'll hear about these supergroups getting put together, and you just probably never quite know how it's all going to come together, what the sound's going to be like, but it's worked for you guys. Why is that?
That's it's a hard question to answer. I think the best answer is that they're all just incredible musicians who love being in the same room as each other. I mean, when you're playing with other great musicians, it elevates you, right? Everyone in the room is elevated. I'm the guy with the big picture, I guess, with an image of how that arrangement should sound. I guess I provide the musical direction, and they're all just amazing pros who listen and really give her,
We happen to have the fortunate timestamp today of talking on International Jazz Day. And I want to know from you, after this time that, we're still going through with COVID and all of this, and times of self-reflection and deep things going down. Talk to me a little bit about the importance of jazz as we move forward and what this day means, and just the torch and the flame, the brightness of this art form as we move forward.
From my perspective, jazz is the all-encompassing form these days, So two things, really. It's like classical. It's a serious art form with a long, long history, or discipline, rather. It's completely different from classical in that it's rooted in improvisation. So there's that. But also, it just seems to me like jazz musicians are looking all over the place for inspiration. They've been, into the Impressionists since bebop, since Charlie Parker and Coltrane. And now people like Brad Mehldau are doing a lot of pop covers. I don't know, it just seems like the most open genre today. Everything else seems to be getting narrower and narrower. What I'm trying to do with Art of Time is the opposite. I want to embrace all great music.
Wow, what a triumphantly optimistic answer. I love that, about the boundaries of jazz. That's wonderful. I think the one thing I've thought about a lot, I've done a lot of interviews with musicians since this began back in March 2020, and as I've kind of evolved through this process of reshaping some things I'm asking and thinking, I've always held on to the notion that at the end of the day, this particular scenario that we're all living through right now, if there's a group of artists that are more in tune to this than anybody else, it has to be the jazz community, because in the core of it, you're creating something that happens once on stage, and the backbone of what you do is improv. And that's all we're doing day by day right now as we live through this thing called a global pandemic.
You could even extend that to, life is one long improvisation, right?
Yeah, I think I've noticed the more I've gotten into jazz, and I've talked to a lot of you cats, is that I start thinking about that. Like when I see things, I'm like, I'll never see that again. There's a billion things going on the planet, but that one thing happened in front of me, and that one thing will never be duplicated again. As much as we do that, and the irony is that when it comes to music, you listen to the same song, it's the same thing over, but it creates a different feeling each and every time, which is the beauty of the cycle.
Absolutely, and I would even argue that you can say if you're listening to a great musician, be they classical or pop, they're never going to do the same thing twice. Even if they're not improvising, like being in the moment is of the essence, right? So, yeah, absolutely, and that's the beauty of live performance, right? Is that a recording is cement. It's cemented. It's dead. I studied with a guy named Leon Fleischer, who I considered one of the greatest pianists of all time. And there was a great debate between him and Glenn Gould about recording. Like Gould, I don't know if you know, but he quit the stage at 31. And he was also, one of the greatest of all time. And he was one of the first in classical music to really embrace recording, because he could attain a level of perfection in the studio that he could never attain on stage. And that's another sort of potential problem with classical music. People they're slaves to perfection, which has nothing to do with music. But anyway, in this debate or this argument, the argument that Fleischer made was that once you record something, it dies in a way, because you can never be surprised by it. It'll never change. Whereas, the essence of a live recording is that even if you come in knowing the piece inside out, and I guess my reference point is classical music, you're still going to be surprised. There's no way of knowing what the musician will do in the moment. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the music really lives in the moment, not so much on recordings. It's great to have that technology, to share our music, but it's a whole other thing from live performance. It's not a substitute for live.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. So kind of piggybacking off of that, when we do get back to live music, when some semblance of what we used to do and getting back in earnest happens, what do you hope we all realize about the power of live music, both musician and the audience, when it does come back?
Well, I can tell you that as a musician, I need an audience to perform for. I need that communication. I need that interaction. And I assume also an audience needs to experience that connection with the performers in a live context, and also in a room with other people who you can share that experience with. So I'm hoping that I'm not sure how, but I'm hoping that people will miss live performance enough to realize how much they need it in their lives. And that's, I think, the best I could answer that.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. Everyone is going to have their perception of who you all are as a band, like who they believe you are and how you operate. But how do you view the band? What's your perception of who you all are and why you all come together for this musical purpose?
If I may, these are the best players, certainly in Toronto, and they all have their own things going on, their own either soloists or, they all have very active careers. So when we come together, everyone recognizes how unique this is, how unusual it is. Like I said, there's nothing like being in a room with other musicians whom you love. And added to that mix is the fact that, the classical people, they live in that world. They never have an opportunity to make music with an amazing jazz musician or accompany an amazing pop singer. So again, it's just that energy that really stimulates everyone who's involved, you know?
Beautiful. Hey, man, I really appreciate you taking some time out for Neon Jazz today to talk about the new project and what's going on, and good luck with the album and the return to the stage. I hope things start getting better up there in Canada.
Thank you. And thanks for giving it a listen.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview. We give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Canada, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Andrew for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.